The Mystery Twin, written by Rachel Kim, illustrated by Darcy Tom. The note. One dark and blustery night, Theresa Alto was securing the windows against a storm when she heard a rapid banging on the door. At first, she assumed it was just the wind, but then it came again. She cautiously opened the door, keeping the chain fastened, for the actors weren't expecting any visitors on a night like this. It was Mrs. Banks from the private adoption agency. "I am so sorry to disturb you on such a night," said Mrs. Banks, "but the agency is moving. When we moved a file cabinet, a note and a photograph fell from behind it. It's about Heather. I thought you'd want to see it right away." 13 years ago, Brad and Theresa Alto had adopted a beautiful baby girl. They had named her Heather after Theresa's favorite flower. Theresa placed her arm around Brad's, worried about what the note might say. Mrs. Bank continued, "The note explains that the baby you adopted is a twin. The birth mother thought there might be a better chance for the babies to be adopted if they were separated. She had to make a difficult decision after the car accident that killed the baby's father. She also included a photograph of the two of them in happier times. I thought it would be comforting for you to have the photograph and exciting for Heather to know that she has a twin." Telling Heather. After Mrs. Banks left, the Altos called Heather into the dining room and sat her down. As they ate dessert, Mrs. Alto started telling the story of Heather's adoption. Heather interrupted. "You know, I'm really glad you are my parents, but really, do I have to hear this story all the time? I could recite it by my heart." Mrs. Gazzo gazed lovingly at her 13-year-old daughter and sighed, and then glanced quickly at her husband. "I know, dear, but now that you're 13 and such a grown-up young lady, there's something else we need to tell you. We didn't tell you before, because we just found out." "What is it? Is something wrong?" asked Heather. Her parents exchanged cautious looks, and then Mr. Alto began. "Dear, we love you very much." "Yes, and," said Heather, growing more and more impatient. "Well, you have a twin," Mr. Alto stated. Heather sat stunned for a moment. "Really? A twin? You mean I'm not an only child? Oh, you know how much I've always wanted a sister. This is the best news ever. Where is she?" "Well," Mrs. Alto began, "your birth mother was afraid that if she left on family with twins, they might reject on both of you, so she thought it best to separate you. The adoption agency can't tell us where your twin is, but Mrs. Banks did leave us this photograph of your birth parents and a note." Heather stared at the photograph. "Wow," she whispered, dumbfounded. "I kind of look like them, don't I? I guess I understand why they thought they had to separate us, but how would I ever know where my twin is? I'd hate to think I have a sister out there who I would never know. Would you help me find her?" "Of course, dear. We'll do everything we possibly can," Miss Alto promised. "But you know, your twin could be a brother as well as a sister." "Oh, a brother? That would be okay too, just as long as it is a sibling," exclaimed Heather. "Why don't we place an ad in the paper?" Mr. Alto suggested. "Or maybe in a couple of papers, and some magazines too." "Great idea," agreed Miss Alto. "In the meantime, we should think about how we're going to determine whether or not someone is actually related to Heather. Heather, why don't you come up with a list of things you think that you and a sibling might have in common?" Heather jumped up. "I'll get started right away. Thank you both so much." The search. While Heather began to work on a list, Mr. and Mrs. Alto prepared an ad for several local and national newspapers and magazines. They also left postings on adoption websites. They were sure to include the exact date that Heather was born and a summary of the contents of the note that was left. The ad asked that anyone who could possibly be the missing twin to contact them immediately and to send a photograph. They waited and waited as responses began trickling in over the next few weeks. Most were just letters of support or emails from people describing their own adoption and lost sibling stories, but a few offered information that helped the Altos. The Altos were finally able to narrow down the responses to three candidates, all of whom were the same age as Heather and had similar birth and adoption dates. All of them had come from the same adoption agency. The Altos contacted each of the families and set up interview times for the following week. Heather finished her list and got ready to finally meet her twin. The interviews. Heather apprehensively reread her list while she waited for the first candidate to arrive. The list read, "Things about myself. I have long, curly brown hair. I have brown eyes. I like to play chess. I like cats better than dogs. I love peanut butter. I have attached ear lobes." Amelia skipped through the door. "I am so excited you chose me to come see you, Heather. You know, I've always had the feeling that I had a sister, but when I see your ad, I almost fell off your seat. I'm sure we're sisters. I can just sense it. I know you and I are twins." Amelia obviously wanted to be chosen as the missing twin. She gave very elaborate answers to Heather's question, giving all the information she needed more and more. The Altos were wary. They didn't want to think Heather's twin was the first candidate just because she was energetic. They wrote down Amelia's responses to Heather's questions. Amelia: "She has long, straight brown hair with light streaks in it. She says she has hazel eyes, but they look sort of brown. She doesn't know how to play chess. She likes cats, but she had a ferret and likes them better than either dogs or cats. She's allergic to peanut butter, so she doesn't eat it. Her earlobes are not attached." The next arrived to Harry, a 13-year-old boy with brown eyes and short, dark hair. Harry was soft-spoken and polite, and said he had read the ad in a local paper and lived just a few neighborhoods away. He answered all the questions very concisely, and seemed like a nice boy, just a little on the shy side, especially when compared to Amelia. Harry: "He has short, curly dark brown hair. She has brown eyes. She likes chess. She doesn't like cats. Peanut butter is not his favorite food. Her earlobes are attached." The final candidates were a very pleasant girl named Casey. She was also 13 and had long curly brown hair, brown eyes, and a nice smile. She chatted with the Altos, seeming very comfortable with the entire family. She even stayed for a while after the interview to talk about chess and school. After she left, the Altos listed her responses next to the others. Casey: "She has long, curly brown hair. She has brown eyes. She likes chess. She likes cats. She also likes peanut butter. Her earlobes are not attached." The Altos sat down and began comparing all the responses. They were a bit upset to find that none of the candidates were a perfect match, though all of them had enough in common that they might be related to Heather. "I don't think we understand enough about her duty to figure out who is related and who is not," said Mr. Alto. "I agree," sighed Heather, who was terribly disappointed that they couldn't figure out who the twin was. "I know," said Mrs. Alto. "Why don't we take the responses over to Mrs. Jean's house? She's a genetic counselor and spends the whole day researching and talking to parents about the traits they pass on the children." So he gathered all the responses and brought them to the next door neighbor, Mrs. Jean, and asked her for help. The selection. Miss Jean carefully read the interview questions and then scanned the responses. First of all, she began, "Let's talk about each of the questions. Your first question is about hair, and it's true that hair color and types is something passed down through your genes." "Genes like blue jeans?" asked Heather. "Actually, I mean genes, spelled Genes, which are units of heredity that transfer traits like hair and eye color from one generation to the next," Miss Jean explained. "Human genes are found in pairs, and you get one from your mother and one from your father. Genes are either be dominant or recessive, which means that a dominant gene will always override a recessive gene. For example, with hair, the genes for brown hair and curly hair are dominant, while the genes for blonde hair and straight hair are recessive." "So that means my gene has to have curly brown hair like I do," said Heather. "Not necessarily. Your parents may have each carry the recessive gene. Also, hair is something you can change by bleaching, blonde, or straightening. So, I would say that you can really use hair type to indicate heredity unless you know for certain that the person has not changed his or her hair in any way, unless we don't whether or not any of our finalists changed their hair, said Mrs. Antle. Now about eye color. The brown eye gene is dominant while the blue eye gene is recessive, so eye color used to be a very good indicator of heredity. But nowadays, people can wear colored contact lenses and change the color of the eyes. I suppose you're right, said Heather, trying not to sound disappointed. And three of these other questions about liking chess, cats, and peanut butter all deal about acquired traits, which means that they are all things you can learn to like or not like. You aren't necessarily born liking chess, cats, or peanut butter, so I'm afraid these questions could not help you find your twin. Heather's head hung low, as did Miller and Mrs. Altos. It seemed they had asked the wrong questions. Don't get discouraged. This last question about attached earlobes may be the key, said Miss Jean. The gene for attached earlobes is recessive, while the gene for unattached earlobes is dominant. In order for recessive trait like that to appear, both of Heather's genes for earlobes must be recessive, so she knows each parent carries at least one recessive earlobe gene. Miller Jean paused for a moment and picked up the picture of Heather's parent. Look at your parents. You can see they both have attached earlobes, so you know that both of the genes were so recessive. There's no way that two parents who carry only recessive genes could have children with unattached earlobes. Heather began thinking out loud. Okay, both my parents had attached earlobes, which makes sense because I have attached earlobes too. That means that my twin must have attached earlobes, and the only one of the finalists who does is Harry. Harry is my twin. That's right, Harry could possibly be your twin, said Miss Jean, but he also may not. It may be just a coincidence that his birthday is the same as yours, that he came from the same adoption agency, and that you both have attached earlobes. In order to be certain that he is your twin, you should both have your DNA tested. DNA carries your genetic code. If your DNA carries some of the same codes, then you are brother and sister. But I thought my twin would be exactly like me, said Heather. Mrs. Jean responded. Identical twins have exactly the same genes. They were born from the same egg that split in two, but fraternal twins were born from two different eggs. They're more like regular siblings, only they were born at the same time. Harry could be your fraternal twin. So if Harry and I get our DNA tested, we can find out for sure whether or not we are twins. Let's go tell Harry, Heather exclaimed. The happy reunion. The Altos quickly called Harry and his family, who were thrilled to hear that Harry and Heather might be twins. The next time, the Altos invited Harry and his family for dinner. Harry and Heather discovered that there was a lot of things they had in common. Both were left-handed, and both laughed as they tried in vain to roll their tongues. Both got the first tooth at 10 months old and named the first pet socks. After talking things over, both families agreed to get the children's DNA tested. However, they agreed that they had enjoyed each other's company so much that they anticipated spending a lot of time together in the future, even if Harry wasn't Heather's twin. A brother sister. History, consign, not identical, exist in particular. Okay, so let's continue doing the quiz.
Good job!
She is older. Found down about the twin, both A and B. No? Different from Heather. Amelia, she's brown hair. She's allergic to peanut butter. She likes cats. Heather probably feels discouraged when told might not be her twin. What is impossible for Amelia or Casey to be Heather's twin? Have brown eyes, to play chess, straight hair, and attached earlobes? have brown eyes actually. Blue eyes are a recessive trait. What other recessive traits of the story mentioned? How does Miriam Jean help Heather in her appearance? To ask the children. When Heather's parents tell her about the teen, does not want a brother? Most twins are identical. Which of the following events happen third? Newspaper, magazines, and adoption websites. 1. Tell adults about 1 here, 2 here, 3 this. Okay, so it depends, but I think genes are like the traits that you inherit from both of your parents. For example, like the DNA, you both inherited the DNA from both your parents and your from your mother, so you both have the same characteristics or personalities from both your parent or your parent as well. Like if your mother had blue eyes and your dad have black hair, then you will have blue eyes and black hair. Or it may be reverse. Do they impact physical traits? Of course it is. Genes definitely determine whether or not you look exactly like your dad or your mom. So yeah, it depends.
We almost passed. Click on the items with
really? They don't have brown eyes? Was it impossible? Oh yeah. I misunderstood this question. I thought was it possible for Emilia? What others? Blonde hair and straight hair. I think this. Oh no, liking chess and not liking chess actually. A.
You passed. Now, click on the items with the red.
Wait, is not liking chess as well?
Look at you go! A
Okay.
perfect score.